Today, we're going to take relatively practical SUV supercars to a very impractical road. Cattle grid. Oh, good God. We'll be looking at stowage areas. Not sure what I'd use that for. Boot space, a place to put some more bags, and noise. To figure out which of these cars is best.
This is the Hardknott Pass in the UK's Lake District. It's the steepest road in England and runs from Eskdale, over there, to the Rhinos Pass over there. It's also a single-track road with hairpin bends, so the ideal car here would be something small, nimble, modestly powered and cheap, like a warm hatch.
Unfortunately, I've bought a Ferrari Purosangue and a new Aston Martin DBX S, neither of which are small or cheap, although they both do have hatchbacks.
We've been here before in proper sports cars and found it a bit much, so we thought we'd see if fast SUVs are better at challenging conditions than their lower slung counterparts.
The Purosangue gets 715 brake horsepower from a 6.5 litre V12 engine. The DBX S, 717 brake horsepower from a 4 litre V8 with twin turbos. Both go from 0 to 62 miles an hour in just 3.3 seconds, and both of them hit 193 miles an hour top speed. I also think that neither is particularly elegant, but they do have road presence. Bet on it. The Ferrari does still take a little bit of getting used to, though this colour doesn't really help. It's got a kind of a waistline down the side of the car that makes it look like there's a sportier car sat on top of another one. At the front, I still see shades of SF90, 296 GTB, all the current sports cars, and then it's got these wheel arches that are kind of 3D inset into the bottom of the car, and then on the bottom it's kind of a, I don't know, like a GT4 Lusso all-road type thing. I do like a bit of flying buttress on the bonnet. Hello everybody. And the more you see it on the road, especially from the back, the more sense it makes. Although this is the car that Ferrari said it would never build. Although they did say that about an electric car as well, and look how that turned out. Still, I never get bored of this. All that. This, on the other hand, is the new Aston Martin DBX S. Now, the interesting thing here is there is no 550 brake horsepower base DBX anymore. The 707 is the only model. The S adds a little bit more power, faster steering, stacked exhaust pipes for exactly the same money. So it's not so much an upgrade as an alternative. One of the interesting things about this car, though, in its normal spec, this weighs about 47 kilos more than the Purosangue, but you can add in a load of lightweight options. The main one being these 23-inch magnesium wheels for £15,000, which save about 5 kilograms a corner. And then usually you get a panoramic sunroof as standard. If you replace it with a carbon roof, that saves 18 kilograms. So when you boil it all down, this would be 2 kilograms lighter than the Ferrari. At a smidge under 2.2 tons, I do think the carbon dash inserts are a bit salty, but you get the idea. And that might not look as sexy as a V12, but I do have quite a lot of love for turbo torque. And that V8 rumble.
So which do you prefer the look and sound of? Personally, I lean more towards the DBX's looks, but that V12 whale is a definite selling point.
Once you're in the Ferrari, it does feel a lot lower than the Aston because you've got this really long bonnet that you sat staring out into the future over, and then inside you've got kind of a double bubble cockpit. Now the passenger has their own screen from which they can do whatever they want, that's a touch screen. Then in the middle, there is a series of haptics. There's a wireless phone charger here, you've got some nice cup holders. This is where you pick your gear from, so you can click it into reverse or whatever, and some storage here with charging. But the thing I wanted to talk about most is the fact that Purosangue has a lot of haptics. Now in later cars, Ferrari put lots more buttons in, but here, even the start-stop button is a haptic switch, which is, I don't know, slightly unsatisfying. It's got shift lights in the top of the steering wheel. It's got really nice carbon fibre paddles for the gearbox. But then all of the functions on here are haptic, and when you're driving around and your thumbs accidentally press something, it does all sorts of stuff. Now, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, no. You see what I mean? It just doesn't work properly. I think in a super sports car, when you're concentrated on driving fast and you have a lot less things to look at, that's okay. In a daily use SUV, I'm not so keen. So for the most used functions, there's this central section. You press that there, and this little click wheel pops out of the dash, at which point you can change the function. So if I do that, you can change the AC. If you do that, you can change the seat heating. You know, if you go to that, no, that's something else. It's just a bit confusing. It does, however, feel quite special. The quality is pretty good. There's carbon fibre everywhere, and it definitely feels like a Ferrari. Interestingly, the Purosangue comes without a radio or native sat-nav, both of which are supposed to go through your mobile phone, which sounds weird for a car that costs £313,000 in basic format. Still, in terms of practicality, you get front doors like this, which are traditional, obviously, and then you get rear doors like this, suicide style. Now, you think these look a bit odd, but because they open to 90 degrees, it makes it very easy to slip in and out of the rear seats, and they're independent of the fronts, obviously. So once you get in, you've actually got plenty of knee room, plenty of headroom. This is my driving position, so that's fairly representative. And the only problem is, you think you can't reach the door, but they're electrically operated. So you just press this button here. And once you've shut the door, you do realise it's quite cave-like in here. If you look, you've got a handspan of window in the back, that coupe-ish roofline kind of cutting into the space that you've got in the rear. And although this has got a full-length panoramic photochromic roof, so you can change the photo density, the lightness or darkness at the touch of a button, it still feels quite dark and quite tight in here. It's got plenty of little functions. You know, you've got cup holders, you've got another haptic touchpad there, you've got wireless charging, and I love the seats. These are very much like the seats you find in the front of a Ferrari. It is still strictly a four-seater, which makes it slightly less practical. And as for the other practical bit, in the boot, well, in terms of big stuff, it's kind of fine. That's 473 litres, which is like a normal hatchback. It does have a couple of tricks up its sleeve though. It's got underfloor storage, which will put a couple of soft bags in it. And then if you have some larger loads, you can actually transform it. So you remove this, and then you drop the seats electrically like this. They are quite slow, so you have to be patient. And then there's two clips here, and you unclip that. And then you can make a kind of oddly shaped but very sexy van. The Aston is more traditional. So if we open the boot here, you will find that the boot of the Aston is actually a third bigger than the Purosangue at 632 litres. And yes, it also does have an underfloor storage, which would usually house the spare wheel, but it's not big enough for the 23s, so it's just a place to put some more bags. And then you can actually drop the rear seats, though not fully electrically. You can pop them open there, remove this, and once I've done this, you do get quite a big space. This is practical. And as for the back seats, well, they're traditional doors on the Aston Martin. And even though they don't open quite as wide as on the Purosangue, you can get in easily enough. And once you're in here, well, it does feel quite a lot lighter and airier than in the Ferrari. It doesn't have a panoramic glass sunroof because this one's got the optional carbon roof, but the windows are bigger and it is quite a lot taller than the low-slung Ferrari, so it just feels a lot airier. Also, there's more knee room, more headroom, and this is a five-seater. Now, why do boots and seats matter? Well, if you're buying an SUV, you want that extra bit of practicality, right? And up front in the Aston, things get even better because Aston Martin has really upped its game with its interiors recently. Now we get this very crisp, very smart touchscreen in the middle, digital dial set, multifunction steering wheel with paddles for the 9-speed gearbox. But it's the centre console I want to talk about because it's got knurled roller switches and they're metal and they feel good and lots of buttons. This car also comes with a thing called CarPlay Ultra. Now the Ferrari might have CarPlay, but Ultra takes over all of the native systems in the Aston's dials, and it's a really nice thing to play with, and it works really, really well. I have to say, I really enjoy it. After that, you've got wireless charging here. Not sure what this is. I think it's just art. There's a proper engine start button, and the outside of that turns to change the modes on the car. You've got the gear selector here. Again, it's cold metal and it feels real quality. Then you've got cup holders here and more storage here with charging inside it. There's also quite a decent storage area down here. Not sure what I'd use that for, but it's handy to have. Generally, I think the Ferrari feels quite a lot racier, but Aston has the super SUV vibes nailed.
It's the driving where they feel the most different though, and that's where things get really interesting. We've already driven these things several hundred miles on motorways and A-roads, and truth be told, they're both fantastic. Comfortable in their most relaxed modes, with excellent ride quality and fabulous stereos. There's always huge dollops of power on tap, and they have a habit of making you feel a little bit invincible. In fact, the only complaints are that the DBX is very V8 noisy at times, and if you want the full Ferrari experience, it needs to be revved higher. But both are more than doable for long distance. Although they aren't massively efficient, you'll be doing quite a lot of this on a big trip.
Right, here we go. We're going to hit the Hardknott Pass. Let's face it, single track roads like these are absolutely not the sort of place you want to be bringing cars as big, as brutish and as powerful as these. But I have come to the conclusion that if these cars can cope here, they will be able to cope pretty much anywhere. So, are super SUVs lithe enough to cope? Let's find out. Cattle grid. Oh, good God. First, the Ferrari. It does feel quite big. Let's cut to the chase. This Ferrari is absolutely magical when it comes to disguising its SUV-ness. I mean, this is floating across these bumps, and the way the steering feels like a Ferrari, like these are really Nadgery roads. They're only just barely as wide as this vehicle, and yet you can place it absolutely perfectly. The brakes are strong enough to make your eyes go bloodshot, and it feels way lighter than it is. I wouldn't dare go down here in a saloon car that hadn't got this kind of body control. Now, one of the interesting things about that is that this Ferrari has a thing called spool valves by Multimatic in the suspension, which essentially have tiny little gearboxes. I can't actually see where I'm going. And there's stone walls. Look at this. Anyway, this thing has spool valves in the suspension by a company called Multimatic. Now, they essentially have tiny little gearbox in each damper, which allow for instantaneous control of each damper stroke. So you don't actually need anti-roll bars. And that means you keep the tyre on the ground and gripping more of the time. Ugh, this feels like I'm doing a tarmac roller coaster. It's absolutely mad. And those spool valves are so good, they feel almost precognitive. Oh my God. And as long as they're working, the car just feels amazing. I mean, they're really, really big bumps. And the car is just working through it. Do you know what? This car should be absolutely all over the place, almost undrivable, and yet it's sticking to this road like it hates it. The 8-speed paddle box is super precise and super accurate, and that V12 is actually very torquey. I thought it would be a bit bloodless lower down, but it's not. Oh, good God. There's so many rocks here. If you get this wrong, you are completely broken. This is a really hard car to dislike. This is almost not a traditional fast SUV. It's far more than that. It does feel largely unique, more like it's a lifted saloon than a full fat sports utility vehicle that's been made quicker. It might not be the most practical, but my God, it is fabulous to drive. The way it tucks in, the way the steering is so super linear, the way that the body control is basically total, it makes it feel like a Ferrari, which on a car this high you'd think might be a problem. But they've done an amazing job of making it feel like a Maranello product. I would not believe a car as big and heavy as this would be able to even drive down this road, never mind do it, and I'm having a perfectly normal conversation. I cannot look at the camera because if I do, I'm going to crash, but this is just epic. So the Aston feels a bit more like a traditional SUV than the Ferrari in that it's bigger, brawnier. It's got a little bit more torque than the Ferrari and you can feel it. But what this car has is the turbochargers from the Valhalla supercar. So even though it's not got a huge amount more power than the DBX 707, it does have more of a rush further up the rev range. It also can't quite match the operatics of the Ferrari's 6.5 litre V12, but it does sound a bit like a Spitfire and a strafing run. It sounds really brawny and deep and bassy. Now I've got this car set up in Sport Plus mode, but because I've got the buttons down here, I've actually put the suspension into comfort. So we've got all of the reactions, but then the suspension is doing the best job it can of absorbing the bumps, and it's doing a really good job. So far, at least. Oi, big car, small road, lots of cattle grids. The thing is, I used to think that the DBX standard car, whoa, didn't quite handle the way that it looked, like it always felt like a bit of a bus. This takes some of that fat out of the car. Now the steering is 4% faster than the 707, and that doesn't feel like much, but it's also got revised air springs, dampers, and an alterable ride control. It's electrically controlled so that the whole car feels like it's going with it. Like you turn the wheel and this will go exactly where you point it. Now the steering might not be quite as accurate as the Ferrari, but the brakes are just as good. The confidence is there. And weirdly, I think this is just as fast across ground as the Ferrari. It just feels fast in a different way. Like it's more muscly and less sinew. Dearie me, this is not the road for this car, but the DBX S is going for it. Oh, big bumps. You see, that air suspension really can absorb things. And because it's got the anti-roll control, it keeps the body in the right place. Look at this. That's absolutely mad for a car this large. In fact, the only major complaint is that the throttle response on this car isn't as sharp as the Ferrari. Now, the Ferrari's naturally aspirated, so you do kind of expect it to have more of a razored throttle, but even with a 9-speed gearbox in this Aston, you do feel like you almost have to preempt the power slightly. In isolation, it's not a problem at all, but when you've just driven the Purosangue, it does highlight it. Oh, this is steep. I'm genuinely surprised by the way both of these cars are capable of moving down a road like this. I thought they'd be hopeless because they're big and they're wide, and I expected them to be understeery and weird. But even though the Ferrari feels very rear-wheel drive and this feels more four-square and more four-wheel drive, they both react with the kind of grip and composure that you just don't expect. I'm absolutely made up with how both of these cars get around here. They have got such disparate characters that I can see why you'd buy either one just because of the way they drive, the way they sound, the way they react. They're both exceptional.
When it gets this much of a close run thing, there's only one thing for it: more testing. All over the Hardknott and the adjoining Rhinos Pass. Other wider bits of the Lake District, just to make sure. And it was glorious.
I've got a bit of a confession to make. I have never ever liked super SUVs. I've always thought for the money, which is considerable, I'd rather have either a diesel estate car or a diesel SUV and a sports car. Because these things, they're always fighting the physics. They're always trying to blend too many things at once. But over the past 2 days of driving these things, I've almost become convinced. It's interesting though, these two cars have very different characters to what the specs would have you believe.
The Aston? It's the archetype brute in a suit. Fast, noisy, big and chunky. It's got a finer edge than any DBX before it, a massive surprise in pretty much all areas, and surprisingly practical. But it's also comfy and well built, makes a glorious noise and hits all the right notes as a super SUV. The Ferrari is almost something else entirely. That V12 is unique in these kinds of cars and it feels like a different idea. Not a sports car, but also not a full-fat SUV. It's Ferrari paring back the SUV experience to be more in line with the Ferrari brand. Not a worse car than the DBX, but something else entirely.
But the Ferrari is notably less practical. And there's another thing I can't ignore. This Purosangue, as a base spec, cost £313,000, whereas the DBX S weighs in at 210. This particular Purosangue has £175,000 worth of options on it, which is frankly obscene. And for those reasons, and the fact that I think it looks great, the DBX S is the winner.